Hi, welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast. My name is Matt Wood, and this is episode 113. I recently sat down for a great conversation with Aaron Brown of Arable. You might know Aaron from Dospar, Bardos, or Haas. Arable is a great new project he's working on with the Future Collective of Sonoma. I think you probably heard the trailer on the podcast for the first panel discussions that were released earlier this year. There are now new discussion episodes coming out with folks like previous podcast guests Matt Neese, Chris Renfro, Jack Sporer, and many others. If you like the podcast, you'll really appreciate what Aaron is doing with Arable. It's available through the Future Collective website and YouTube channel, and as an audio podcast. Before I start with Aaron, you'll hear some of the trailer for the episode with a conversation between Matt Neese of North American Press and Chris Renfro of the 280 Project. A reminder that I have a Patreon at patreon.com/IndieWinePodcast. Link is in the show notes also. And if you're joining the podcast, any amount to help me keep telling wine stories ad-free is super appreciated. It's all run independently and meant to be available for everyone. Last thing I want to do is put any sort of wall around the access to information. Telling a friend about the podcast, sharing about it on social media, or leaving a review are great, quick ways to help out too. Here we go.
Well, now when you introduce new species, now all of a sudden, like the flavor spectrum gets so much wider, and the color spectrum, gets so much wider because now you're introducing these different grape species that have new flavors that we've never really, in some cases, have never experienced in wine, which I think is so exciting about it. Yeah.
It feels like now is a good time for people to put their differences aside and just be like, I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
I'm a winemaker. I appreciate what you do. You understand what I do. How do we share our skills? How do we share our knowledge? How do we actually make this industry viable for everyone and make it long lasting? Because this last season felt pretty scary to watch some pretty big giants kind of say that they didn't know what was next. Being in this hybrid space feels actually pretty secure. It feels fun.
Yeah.
So,
Amen to that.
yeah, it feels fun. It feels like we are doing something that is paying homage to people from the past, but also what they saw the future as also.
All right. Well, yeah. Why don't? Cool. So I'll do the backstory.
Yeah.
So Aaron Brown, director. I kind of see myself as almost, when we can go into this later, I talked to Maria about it a lot in an episode, as almost this anthropology of wine, and like how it sort of carries certain cultural content and curiosity along through time. But basically, we're on Highway 12 right now in Boys Hot Springs. I was born in a house kind of on the other side of the highway, like a couple blocks away.
Okay.
So born here in the early 80s. I was born in 1982, and so it was a very kind of closed, quiet place. It had, and I've done a lot of, I really like history, and sort of different channels of history and culture. And so, it turns out there was a kind of an arts community here that, like anywhere, sort of grows and contracts and kind of, it kind of tends to be a Northern California quality.
Yeah, definitely.
Because what felt like a pretty closed culture at the time as a kid growing up and then into high school, I became obsessed with the city and like going into the bookstores and the record stores and kind of joke around that would make friends with people if they had a car, just like get to the places and go see the shows and so in a way, I was always sort of like trying to get out of here. And it was sort of a romantic thing. I was like, oh, the answer's there. It's like, this is the problem, kind of like very like dualistic thinking when you're a teenager, and like right, good and bad type of stuff. And so I basically I got into the arts, and I sort of leveraged like trying to go to art school to get to the city.
Okay.
And I took some art college programs, and I don't know, it wasn't. That's when things got funny. Like it wasn't quite what I imagined. Like it wasn't this like quick fix, you know. Like oh,
Yeah, you're like trying to escape the small town, and then
Yeah.
get there, and you're like, oh, what now, kind of. Or-
Yeah, because people were like, they were figuring out what they were doing, and then, the people there were not unlike people here because they're people, and so it was like, so then you kind of go on this like seeking quest, right? And I ended up in the Midwest. I ended up in Chicago, and that actually weirdly felt like a kind of an answer because it was just so different. It was like really industrial, and like Midwesterners are very, very kind and very straightforward. They felt different than people on the West Coast, and so that was fun. But I sort of fell into hanging out with like musicians, like cheap little cheap houses with like 10 people living, and like they had a band, and then there's a community and like a buzz around it, and so I really fell into that those sort of scenes, and this was the early 2000s, and there's a lot of like cool fun shows, like wild warehouse shows and stuff. So it was just like fell into the current I was looking for. And then a lot of those people were interested in California, so we drifted back out west, to the Bay, and lived in houses in Oakland and then in the Mission and stuff, and so kind of riding with those music people. Some of them, got popular online, and the internet was starting to really blow up, right?
Yeah.
And I would come back to Sonoma, and there were kids that looked cool. Like they looked like us. And I was like, how? And it was just because it was like, you have MySpace. You have like these virtual communities where you can like amplify your your sort of like fringe perspectives, right?
Yeah, and the influences from other places are like instant.
Yeah.
Then once you get the internet,
you just has that affirmation, right? And you can like dress crazy and like parade down the street and like, who cares? But just a few years before early social media, which felt very positive. Now it's obviously been kind of commodified, and as happens with anything. But then it was just like really positive feeling, and it was like a platform that my peers who were in bands like could really market and like tour based on. There were these sort of like touring circuits, like old like DIY kind of music scenes before the internet. Like they'd have like zines, and like I remember the people at the houses we lived at that were a bit older. They would have these huge address books, and like they would write letters all the time. Like they were always writing letters, and they had these crazy address books that was like, they were priceless. It was like, these are addresses in Cleveland and Brooklyn and, Baltimore. Like you can go there and like you can stay there as a band or something. And so, so after the Midwest, some of us came back to the Bay Area, and some of those acts, got popular with this like burgeoning online stuff. And I was getting into just handheld cameras and stuff, and seeing parallels, like visual parallels with like analog old VHS and like Super 8, like consumer cameras, and like how people were recording music. And so I would just kind of film them in the ways that I heard the sounds, and try to like film things that I felt were fun and like unique and sincere about like just like being around them, because these musicians are personalities, they got an energy. So fast forward, that gets kind of commercialized quick. I start being asked to direct things, for these online platforms that are getting corporate sponsors and then money, and then you suddenly have a career and you're making commercials and working with, mainstream record labels. And 10 years goes by, I'm working in the UK a lot. And that's when I started. There's something about being from Sonoma. You have this sensitivity to like the experience of food and wine, even though I had rejected it. There's some olfactory kind of intuition that like when I would go places, like I just would look for the interesting looking places to eat,
Yeah.
like whether it was like, like a Armenian restaurant or like some, and then like street food was becoming popular too. So you could kind of do the highbrow, lowbrow thing, which was kind of a lot of how we looked at music. It was very like, the DIY versus like breaking into the mainstream and like going big and working with a big producer, but also keeping like a sense of your identity. And so in the same way with that kind of street food thing that was coming up in the aughts, you could kind of explore these places where you'd go travel to do production. When I was in the UK, I would just start like taking the weekends and going and I would go to Europe and I was really aware of this like outsiderism of wine, and then the cider stuff in the UK was like these people were just, they had it, they had the thing that the bands had,
You're right. Okay.
and there you are, in the case of me, 10 years into production and the commodification of art, I was kind of like a little burnt out on just that process. And then but I would see like chefs or winemakers or these like cider makers with these old orchards, I was like, they got the glint, like that sort of outsider thing.
Yeah.
And the punk kids and, Pilsen in Chicago had or something, it's just that like that buzz. And this was like 2017 probably, almost 10 years ago now.
Okay.
And so this thing had sort of come along and what felt like it was pretty established. There was the Georgian wines and stuff were really established in the UK at the time. And like that was super interesting, like the history of it all. So then I start to make my way back to California for work and stuff. And when you come back to California from Europe, you just look at things different,
Sure.
And it was cool sitting around pubs in the UK. People would really speculate about history a lot. Like let's take the rock formations for example, right? Like where did Avebury or Stonehenge, like who did that, right? And so each person kind of contributes what they know,
Yeah.
And they get all worked up and excited. I didn't know about that version, and the Turks would come up trading tin and kind of bring things up, or there's like ley lines or there's you full on like Joseph of Arimathea, it's like the Grail and stuff. I mean, it was all this stuff, And then you come back to the United States and California in 2017, and things are just really polarized. It's like this is right, that's wrong, and especially California because it's a pretty young concept. But then of course you're plopped into Sonoma, which is where the concept of California was developed, and the Republic of the Bear Flag Republic, 1846, like less than 200 years ago,
Yeah.
this was Mexico, so, and people don't really talk about that. So you're alone. I was alone, and I was looking at this place with this lens of conversation at the pub, and I was like, what is this, and then also, with the culinary buzz and the winemaking buzz in Europe, you kind of bring that back too. And so you go to the city, and then you got your goggles on, and you're like, oh, that looks like the thing, in Europe. And those people, and they're like, who are, and they had the same, there's like distributors. And so you're looking at as though it was like a record label. You're like looking for the logo on the back label,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it just starts to all animate again, here's these people really devoted to this kind of like creative mystery of their projects. And
Yeah, it's good that you can see all those like similarities coming from the music side.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them.
Yeah, totally. And also, what I was doing in Chicago, and that I've continued to do is sort of pursue this like academic channel when I have gaps in work, and so that my academic background is like ancient Greek and Romanticism, and then that came over into sort of like Jungian psychology, and then archetypal psychology. So of course my imagination quickly goes to like Dionysus is the god of wine and music, right? So there's like some overlap, like, these things connect to me, this like cool transpersonal entity that I was really, I would always like to read about, in school. And so it sort of was reawakened with this wine culture that was so cool. And so I have a project, and like I start doing things, and other people I meet are just feel like allies. And so there's these wine fairs and stuff. And it really just but you're always like traveling to these things. And I kept wondering about Sonoma,
Okay.
and like, this is the place where it comes from. Like, there's all these interesting people kind of, at the very least, buying fruit here, or like energetically connected to the place. And I'm thinking about what led me away in the first place, to the cities and to this career. And, that questioning was like sort of like what I started to want to have organized conversations with people, like what unites us all, because you could arrive at a conclusion, right, and say like, this is what unites us all. Or I just felt like if I just get a couple of interesting people together and talk, like something will triangulate and it'll be entertaining.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was what Arable was born out of. And arable is actually an English like word for ag. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily English, but I just heard it a lot. And it just means like agricultural, right?
Okay.
And so being in Sonoma, it was like, we just tried doing all of these things to see what would animate it or activate it, right?
Yeah.
Because we know people like the products in the cities, we know at the fairs, but it was like, what can we do almost as like offerings, or like what devotional things can we do to appreciate the place of its origin, the wines and the food and the canard growing lettuce, and and just the legacy of farming that was that's told as a story at Chez Panisse, and these other locations that were developed out of that venue. Like it was a platform to then for all of these other creatives to go do other projects, right? And it still is such like a charged place. You see these personalities coming out of all the time, like with their visions, and it's like a school or something, you know. And you see that more intensity in urban places. Like there's like a more of an audience, you could say. Yeah. But wanting to be like connected to the source was a bit of a mystery, and like what, because people are different. Like farmers are different than like and this is very Arable. We're going into the personality of Arable. It's like, if you really want to like understand the connection, you start to notice that like a farmer is really different than like a server at a restaurant.
Sure.
And the server is the one telling the story, right? They are the one that like completes the circuit to the audience, who then like consumes the energy of the wine or the food. And so if that circuit isn't completed, by the representative of this restaurant venue, or a shop too, like you're standing next to the shelf, people are like looking at things. There's the shop owner or person working at the shop, and the story that they tell at that moment, that little elevator pitch, is like what completes the circuit for then the the belief or faith in the product by the consumer to be like, that is a reflection of something in me, right? It like it harmonizes it, like. And the feeling, I know the feeling when I'm going in a store, going in a restaurant, and somebody says something, it's like two sounds detuned and then they tune, and you're like, I feel connected to this thing, right? And you're like, I want that.
Yeah. You feel like that, I guess, gets like lost in translation.
Well,
sometimes.
It's in a way, it's all translation, right? So it's there's this series, and it goes back to it's. I mean, I can get pretty far out pretty quick, but it's sort of animistic, right? Where you're, an animism is the belief of that all things like have a life force. It's what's the Japanese? Oh, Shinto is like very like everything is like represents or expressive of the essence of that thing, that rock or that tree or the dirt. So when you're talking about food and wine, you're telling a story of where the product came from, the place, the culture, the terroir, the farmer. It's kind of however much you want to describe. But if you really get a bit gumshoe about it and like go down in there, like you start meeting all these different kinds of people. And a farmer, again, is like very different than somebody who they're interfacing with the dirt and the plants. They don't really talk back. So there's not a lot of talking, right? But they have a crazy intuition, and they can sense things or forecast things based on patterns that wouldn't really make sense to us. And in a way, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at, and this was something that I really had to feel into, is they tend to be kind of conservative, right? Because they're a bit afraid. It's like you put so much energy into something, it can just all not work. Which is an insane thought, to just have like a whole year of something that you get up at 3 a.m. and like go, spend all this money, and then some weather fluke, does like
hail,
it rains,
heat,
and
rain,
makes mold. And so Arable was kind of born out of this curiosity about these how these different personality types are connected. And then how we tell stories on behalf of the land, essentially. And so, and it's a kind of impossible thing to do, but if you get people together who are constantly having to navigate these different sort of personalities, and the things beyond these people, which is nature, and then also like economics, right, of sales, because sales is weirdly maybe as mysterious as nature. You know, it's like you can have a lot of research and forecasting and people who have like an intuitive sense about it, but it's just things can go wrong. You know, the market can turn, and sometimes a turn in the market will be abundant for some people and then not for others. And the same with farming. Like, you can leverage a crisis in a way, and then do something interesting sometimes. But these sort of like big question marks are what motivated me to start to just pair people together. So I started the interviews. A peer and friend of mine, Kim Jones, was starting this thing called the Future Collective, and it was this other kind of investigatory project on the economics of Sonoma and you know, housing affordability, and also kind of the under the umbrella of agriculture too, because you know, Sonoma is an agricultural town. It's maybe more than that, a tourist town. You know, we can kind of go into that in a minute. But so Kim and I started talking, and she had been thinking about like doing a panel. It's funny, I can't remember the exact beats of how these things formed, but we did that Let's Get Deep series that, you know, formed quick, and it was really cool. You know, it was moderated by, you know, Elaine Chacon Brown.
Yeah.
And they're such a deep sort of shepherd of concepts and relationships. It's really hard to name the feeling of being in a room when, you know, they're facilitating a dialogue. It was really cool.
Yeah, they do a really great job.
Yeah, that was pretty remarkable. And so what Kim and I were doing was, just basically thinking of concepts under which we could invite people in that were as kind of varied and diverse perspectives as possible, right? So you get hospitality, you get farming, you get sales, you get winemaking, you get chefs, you get other nonprofit personalities, and you know, housing advocates and indigenous advocates too. And so that sort of network of perspectives just really raises the energy in the room, you know. And when you're not trying to, this was something Elaine would do a lot, was we're not trying to problem solve, we're trying to identify problems. And in a way, you know, therapeutically, when you do that, or, you know, biologically or something, when you identify an energetic blockage or something, you can kind of, just by knowing and identifying it, it almost gets relaxed in a way. And so things can start to flow more smoothly, and there's less friction and assumptions, right?
Yeah. Kind of brings it to the light a little bit.
Yeah. And so I really started seeing Arable as this sort of inquiry into a place and like what its identity was. You know, what is Sonoma? And it's fun because you can use a bit of, you know, Jungian modeling, where it's like a person, when you go into Jungian analysis, there's different things, but one of them is like we have a persona, but then we have this sort of like essence or sort of soul, right? That is sort of more felt as, there's this acorn theory where like the acorn like already has the makeup of the tree in it, you know, it's just sort of like becoming its destiny, so to speak. So it's a sort of a nature nurture thing. And so when you look at Sonoma in that way, which I had never really occurred to me to do to a place until I just sort of watched these conversations and these relationships animate, was it was like Sonoma is a tourist place, and that's like a kind of a persona, right? It's sort of it's an outward facing identity, which personas are cool. Like, especially if you're an artist, you kind of go into character, you on behalf of the work of art, right? And so you kind of have to do things in service. Again, it's kind of like devotional in order to shepherd the work itself, right? The body of work itself, right? You make the wine, but then you got to go sell the wine, and so you kind of get good at playing the part.
Right.
And I think the ego or the persona gets bashed a lot, but it's a work of art in itself. Once identified, and once you realize that there's like valences or to like the essence, and then the outward facing kind of vehicle of personality. And so Sonoma has this really robust persona designed for visitors. Like this is a beautiful place, very tranquil and abundant, makes wonderful wine and food. But sometimes with this dynamic, we can kind of get lost in our fabricated personas in order to be in service of like the essence. And so Arable was like, well, okay, well, this persona of Sonoma is very well established. What's behind it? Where did this all come from? And even if you just do a little dusting off, a little digging, you go back into the 90s, back into the 80s, the time when I was sort of running away, what people were doing that were my age now in their 40s, they were kind of weirdly doing the same thing. But the 90s is really when there was a lot of opportunities to kind of like cash in a way, which people do, and like people do that now, and like things are kind of set up to do that. That's how the system is organized. Things are born in these really creative sparks of energy, and then once they've been around long enough, that in a way they sort of crystallize, and then it's like, oh, do you need like financial security?
Yeah.
And so then you got to ask those questions of yourself, and you got to ask your family and ask your friends, like, what do I do here?
Yeah. There's always like a part where it's like, does it stay as the art project?
Yeah.
Or is it like a money making enterprise or lifestyle?
Yeah. And I think, back to music, that's a really, really hard thing to bridge. It's super complicated. People have done it.
But that spark, I think, is like super important because, I mean, I think you see it with like a lot of musicians' first albums. Like, you have like your entire life to like grab stuff from and put it into this.
Yeah.
And then like the second album, you're like, oh, I've
The
been touring for like
sophomore
a year and a half. Like, what new do I
You don't have access to that. Yeah.
You don't have like, now you just have like a year and a half of like hotels and that type of stuff to like pull into the music. Like where do you
you're not drawing
go?
from like the same well.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, to see that experience of a town, and almost like an industry in a town. I mean, that's a very industry dimension of the town. But I just started to see, I started to dig a bit in history and see like, oh, there's photos of, I mean, I have them. I scanned them. One of my high school best friends, Giovanni, his mom had a diner, which is out where the Kivelstadt thing is called Ford's Cafe.
Okay.
And there was a San Francisco Examiner magazine in the 80s that his mom, Marie, who had the restaurant, she found this contact sheet of the photo shoot where they came in and did a series. And we actually got these high resolution scanners and scanned the contact sheet and blew up each frame and showed them at the tasting room. But it was basically like you saw Marie would be like, oh, that's Bunshu, that's who were they? Sebastiani, I'll have to get back to you. But it was everybody, and they're all sitting next to each other in their farming clothes in the dark at 5 a.m. Drinking coffee, going out to the vineyards. And you're like, oh, all those brands were born out of the like pretty similar thing that like all the Jack Spore, Chris Renfro, Matt Neese, Dan Marioni, Maria Bailey, like everybody, that same spirit, and to see those photos was like just a really, it was, I don't know, it was interesting, and it just brings to life that spirit,
And the brands of that time aren't necessarily the brands
they
are today.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Who knows what they are today? I haven't gone that far into like that stage of, commerce, but it was just so cool to see them and just see that, like we're all kind of the same. And they were probably up against the same questions, like what is the essence of this thing that led me to do this? And it's like a muse thing. Like, what is this muse? What is this creative, urge to explore, this process of, well, in this case, fermentation, it's a very mysterious, path to scale and to explore and to understand the traditions and the legacies. And so with Arable, it was, let's take, the first episode, we're going to, I think, release the trailer next week. So this is kind of like timely, actually. Okay. I think that the next episode is with Chris Renfro and Matt Neese. And so you get those two in a room and like the whole world comes alive. It's like this whole like history of the Bay Area and then California and then the United States. And then it's like at this, you just see this like quantum, like history that's just like right under the surface. Like it just wasn't in the mainstream, with the hybrids,
Yeah.
And so then what starts happening is there's this whole dimension of like community that forms around this awareness, of these, underrepresented, species or, varietals or, life forms, you could say. That's the point of Arable, right? Is to triangulate with two people, this kind of awareness that we're always looking for, places to like crucibles to hold it in, so it can really like heat up and come to life. And so these conversations are like these podcasts are supposed to be those like touchstones, right? For people to like have, to go back to, and like do their own work. Like we were talking about Chez Panisse, like people, so many things were born out of that, because of that, it as a crucible or a school. And so like you make something that's available, then people can go do their thing. I remember with sales, people would be like, oh, well, this and your thing is this, and this other thing is potentially a competitor,
Okay.
And it's like, or because of your thing, people didn't know about it, so they try it, and then they want to go try the other thing. They want to try it all, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like whether it's not really a competitor, it's a build.
Yeah, it's a stepping stone.
You're building and
you're
like creating
amplifying.
something larger.
Yeah,
and that's put together.
Because that's how I worked. I'd like try something. I was like, "What the hell is this?" Like what's a co-ferment? And then so you're just like, if you see another one, you're like, "Whew, get that."
Yeah.
You're like going back to the one. And so that's how these like conversations are. Is they only go so far. Like this conversation now can only go so far. But when I hear a conversation with you and Coral or something, it's like, well, this was going somewhere, and then you guys started talking about that, and I want to know where that was going to go.
Yeah.
So you start digging, based on the like termination point of that conversation. And
Yeah. There's always a lot of things that require, well, I love those things, I guess, that require that curiosity to kind of continue. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to do it like crazy when I'm researching things for the podcast, like historical episodes, and you're
Exactly.
like, oh, that, or like, oh, there's that name again. Like, okay, I saw it, that, like, I recognize it from here. I saw it again. Okay, like, what is this? And you go down that.
Yeah.
And you can get pretty deep, and then at some point you have to come back. And
Yeah.
but just following those like little curiosity trails
It's
and
addictive,
breadcrumbs and
Yeah.
stuff. And
they're little cliffhangers.
Yeah.
Like in the when you listen, and then you got to go dig. And a big cliffhanger is kind of when you get off of the virtual space altogether, because it's just not there, and there's more. So you got to go. You'll get in the car and like drive to a place or something.
yeah, yeah,
And that's fun. And then there you are, like in a vineyard or some place alone, and you're like, this isn't, what am I doing? I remember in the UK they had cider in this Breton cider is this Normandy cider, and they were in 40-ounce bottles,
Okay.
like NWA or like would drink. Or it was obviously a big thing in California. Like everybody, the rappers and the skaters, they drank 40s in the 90s. And so it was funny for me to see this like unfiltered cloudy cider in that format. And so when I came back to LA, I knew that like a lot of the the Mexican beers would come in the Crown Cap 40s, right? The Corona, and they have those. They're called caguamas. They're like, and I like the Crown Cap format, right? Because it's like very of the thing. And so I started going down to Mexico. I was like, I want to get these Crown Cap, quart size or 40-ounce size bottles to like work with my home brew. Because I can Crown Cap, I have the Crown Capper. It was really hard. It was really hard to find where they came from. I drove to Tecate, and like they actually sourced them from Monterrey, which is pretty far away. And I actually found myself going to the recycling area in Tijuana, because that's the other thing is you're like gleaning fruit, you're getting second picks, you're getting like unused fruit, and I was like, I'm gonna use used bottles, like zero carbon footprint kind of thing. And so there I was in Tijuana, like digging through the dump.
yeah. You're like, how did I get here?
What in the world is going on? So you kind of you get led down these funny things when you're really like possessed by the vision. But that was what again, the people in this series are all like that. They're kind of like driven by something. I mean, the hybrids is such a. I wish everybody could hear that story, like my aunt and like anybody.
Yeah.
I feel like anybody would like those stories, And then we go into like Jack Sporer and Eric Mayer, and they're doing the biochar, and it's like, and Jack's really, really snooping around how to understand the use of like glyphosates in the county and in commercial ag, and the the concerns about that, and like. There's obviously a lot of lobbying around this kind of stuff, so you got to like tiptoe and understand people why somebody would do that. It gets a bit politicized and all this stuff, but it's an obvious huge concern that should be understood of like the behavior of these chemicals.
Yeah.
And then so you get Jack talking to Eric, who's doing this biochar, which is like location-based, burn processing. And then we were working with Charlie Toledo of the Susquehanna Tribal Council, who is a big advocate of the burn traditions of the people of this area, the Miwok and the Pomo, and they it was
Right.
banned, and it's being brought back by these people as representatives of this tradition of the land.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff gets super complicated because for example, we were out at Oak Hill one time, and they were doing some supervised burns, and then you get all these like agencies coming because they got to check off things, and there's
Sure.
25 people standing around, which is positive because they're doing it. You gotta start somewhere, but but then you have these Charlie will tell us that that they've been doing it for 10 plus thousand years, unbroken burns,
Yeah.
except for the last 150 where there was like really kind of tragic oppression of it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't broken, it wasn't forgotten, luckily, and so they kept that alive.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I mean, with like the missions in
Yes.
general, is that so many of those traditions were lost,
Yeah.
or forgotten about.
Aggressively, suppressed and violently. I mean, it's horrible. So and that's the other hard thing about digging is, man, you come up against some like stuff that your whole system is just like so ashamed and so disgusted by. You're like, what? How do I be here?
Right.
Like what? I can't go back. I'm this odd hybrid myself at this point. Like I don't have a continuous ancestral lineage. It's all a rat's nest, so it's like the only way to get is to go forward, and so you find people like Charlie who through the music, I actually ended up working with some indigenous nonprofits. That's another story, but it's a really hard process to go through the decolonialization stuff that you're asked to do if you're going to work with tribes, and each tribe asks you to do it in totally different ways, and you have to. It's like if we're going to work with Alaska, it's totally different than Northern California, and as it should be. So Charlie, came out to one of the burns with Eric and started saying like, this is just such a profound thing to see the land. If you have the capacity to think on perspective of the land, just in some fractional amount, it's like it's showing Eric and Jack and me and people who watch the thing like how to burn. Like it's like, why are you doing this here? What? That's so crazy that you're just like doing this burn program all of a sudden that was arrived at through the most like obtuse technologies of calculus and engineering and PhDs and stuff, just to get back to what's been being done for since time immemorial. And it's such a beautiful thing to behold that and I certainly wouldn't have had the capacity to pick up on that if Charlie hadn't been there, and been sort of just so impressed by the intelligence of this place to just start to show us like how to take care of it. And then Maria and I talk a lot about the anthropology of agriculture and these sort of subordinated chains of wisdom. Maria has a lot of awareness of the hybrids, but also is bringing other plants into her fermentations, right? And then the lineages of cider through the past of the United States. To I don't know if you've gotten into like Jupiter Evans.
I have the book. It's on my.
Oh, cool.
It's,
I didn't know there was
two,
a book.
two behind.
Yeah.
But So I can't speak to it yet, but
Yeah, well, I mean,
but it's in my breeding pile.
Yeah. It's it's in the it's you should probably have her listen to her talk about it because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, no, just a little, but not much.
it's there's just these we're told these stories in school, and then there's like all of these other characters
Yeah.
that were doing stuff, and when you find the ones that were inspired to do it and had the vision to do it, like Jupiter, those are the artists, those are the musicians, those are the ones that have that like cool spark, that just is like, and the peers that are doing it now, like Maria. I mean, Maria has the spark, it's
Yeah.
like she lights up. And then with her, we can get into like the definition of wine and how a lot of things, with the arts, with wine, these things get kind of siloed into an ivory tower over time. And again, this is one of those things that it sort of seems like there's just an arc that things do that. They get sort of siloed out. And then, you like we were talking about with the winemakers in the 80s, and then the projects just like harden or something. And it's like, and things separate, and it's almost alchemical in a way where they break apart, but then we do things to reanimate like the origin energies and in new forms, and so it's just the cycle starts again.
I think it can just be kind of like growing up too, just like child and
exactly.
like the innocence and curiosity, exactly, and then it's like you harden into a person. It gets like refined, and I mean, even like if you're just going by a winery, it's like, oh well, that SKU's not selling well, like let's tighten that, or I mean, you just do things that you feel like you need to move up to the next level.
And speaking of the tribal people, I've been lucky enough to work on behalf or in service of, is some of the elder people, the ones that are held as elders in the community, like they have a childlikeness too. So there's this weird thing that happens where the people that really complete the circuit, so to speak, they reconnect with their like inner playfulness. And then those are the ones that like, that's kind of what you want to aspire to be, is like to be mature, but also have a connection to the source, creativity still.
And curiosity and everything.
And so Mario does this cool thing and goes into how wine was like it was a medium to provide medicines or to provide ritual or daily consumption of immune support, right? If you're in Missouri in 1875, Kaiser isn't around the corner. It's like you have to have all these like plant allies.
Yeah.
And what you're not going to go out and munch on some nettle. You have to like soak it. It breaks down in the wine. And then you have like nettle beer or something, right? You have these ferments.
So it's transforming it into something that your body can handle.
And that was the point of a lot of alcohol. For when there weren't hospitals and stuff, is like there were agents and vehicles of health, like weirdly health, it was medicine. It was the vehicle of medicine. I mean, I know I take tinctures every day and grain alcohol because it's a vehicle. Sure. It's a form of extracting the medicinal properties of something. And so, Maria's really wise about that whole dimension of like the cultural, and it would be made, with other fruit. It would be made with grain. It would be made with other sugar sources, other things that had like robust, sources of yeast strains on the skin or something. And so you get these mixtures of of wine uses.
And local,
Exactly.
also like very
Yeah.
local
Yeah,
based, like
folk wisdom, basically.
yeah,
And so when you think about like you know what wine has become as, again, this very siloed, highly specific product, not unlike a painting or a recording artist or something. Like it gets to a certain point where you're like, it has to be of a certain caliber or like appearance or something, and
yeah,
it sort of
style.
disconnects from the origin of like what all this stuff was meant for. Dan interviewed some people, and Dan Marioni. I mean, he is kind of a representative of a lot of what we've been talking about. He has this, he's fifth generation Swiss. They were Swiss immigrants, and this, the Swiss Hotel in Sonoma is the oldest restaurant in California.
Is it really? Wow.
I mean, yeah.
Who knew? Well, I'm sure a lot of people knew.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Yeah, there's arguments that it's what's it called down in San Francisco in the business district. Is it
Taddich Grill.
So Taddich was around the corner, and it moved in like 1890 or something. So they kind of came about at the same time, but Taddich like moved.
Okay.
The Swiss, of course. I mean, it's, again, California was conceived on the plaza in Sonoma. The Mexican, northernmost Mexican territory. General Vallejo's ranch, and so in a way, it would have to be the oldest. I mean, because it was here, and so like, if you sign the thing, it's like here. I don't know, like whatever. I don't know who signed what. The Bear Flaggers were insane, and it was a crew of crazy people, probably, that just a mob. It was a mob. There was a lot of mob things happening.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, and if you read about some of the people involved, like their life stories are insane.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, it's scary stuff. And so, but Dan's family has been, a part of that building. I have the year, I can't remember. We've been helping him with, honing that story, because it's weird stuff to go into. Like, it helps to have somebody like go into history together, because again, like you constantly are coming up against like weird stuff that's like kind of sad or like ignorant, and so we have to persevere and reconnect to the beauty and the spirit of it all. And so it's been really rewarding to do that with Dan. Like he talks to Lauren Feldman of Valley.
Okay.
About, growing up here. Lauren grew up in Sonoma County, and just that again, like we were talking about earlier, in my experience of growing up here, is just this it's sort of like quiet and sort of dense feeling, but also the spirit is undeniably here. It's just how you fan the flames, so to speak, and cultivate in an intentional way, which Valley has definitely done. And again, almost like the Chez Panisse metaphor, like created a venue and platform for people to feel confident to continue to amplify that energy, and co-create together, and also Valley is that venue that you think of, where it's a place to tell the stories of the farmers, right, and the relationship to the land, and like be as curious and sincere about those difficulties and tensions, of the diverse experiences of working in agriculture, which is very continuously mysterious process, both ecologically, politically, economically, and and that's where the Future Collective has come in as this very like boots on the ground, like this is where people need help,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
to
How's
could-
the next generation like
yeah,
fit in?
exactly.
with this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what is the next generation? How is it supported? What does it need, and how does it feel safe to ask for what it needs? And not feel like ashamed of those needs, right? Because just to be in this county takes a lot of resources. There's not a lot of housing. The housing that's there is too expensive to pay for if you work here. Like things like just that simple algebra. And so Dan also talks to Tom Larson of Larson Family Wineries, who are some of the first organic farmers in Sonoma, and they had and they're a really interesting paradigm to me too, because they have that kind of NorCal. They had a rodeo, so
Okay.
like an iconic rodeo in Sonoma County. And Sonoma County always had this kind of like this funny hillbilly hippie thing, or like redneck Rasta, they used to say in the cannabis world. And it was like you sort of have to understand the conservatism of just the mystery of working with nature, but then also the kind of progressive ideals of like what you want to materialize through that work. And so you're around these people, and you're learning from these different kinds of people, and again, like kind of triangulating into like organic values, but then also being around these old timers that are just kind of like set in their ways because it's dangerous to deviate. Like
Sure.
they won't use chemicals, but they also don't like certain certifications of progressive things like organic. Like they're like, we don't trust these people coming around and like making us do these sprays that are different, and it's like, we know it works. It's healthy for our land, and it's like we're gonna stick to it. But those traditions are eclipsed too, because you lose one person in that lineage, and then somebody else comes in and has to manage. And so all these things need to be kind of like documented and evaluated, because there's kind of wisdom in all the different diverse perspectives, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I mean farmers have always been like a self-sufficient bunch also, and but the wisdom doesn't always get out there in the same ways it does with other groups. Like it gets dispersed like very casually. I think sometimes. So being able to document,
it's an oral tradition.
Is important.
It's a folk tradition. Weirdly, it's the academia is starting to get into it, which is exciting. Like people are definitely picking up on it, kind of being the 11th hour with some of that stuff. And so there are some like really interesting programs at Davis, where they're like going out and talking to old timers and being like, why do you do this? Like, and this is like funny thing. And they're like, well, it's similar to like biodynamics, and like it gets like, why are you doing that? And it's like, well, there's actually silica in the horn, and like there's chemistry. It's not spoken in a scientific way, but you can understand why things were done in a certain way. And ideally, I think with Arable, I mean, what I would love to see is like people that kind of feel confident to develop their own agency to have programs of working with the land in the climates and environments that they work in. Because biodynamics it's from Austria, and then like permaculture is from Australia. It's like, it would be beautiful to see people coming together and understanding, like having some kind of vetting system or protocols of like, this is how we check things in this valley, and this is how we check things in this valley, and having communities sort of really finding that intuition and in connection to nature so that they can trust themselves, and not have to kind of depend on these really these perspectives that are just really far away, and that's why, when you work with indigenous wisdom and things like that, that's what what they have, what they carry, is this intuition and this trust of their intuition that then systems are, built upon.
Yeah. In that local area.
Yeah, like this Pepperwood Preserve over, near Santa Rosa, like they do a lot of burn stuff, and I think his name Tim McKay, maybe. But somebody says, "Well, when do you burn?" And he's like, "When the," and then he kind of like gets the glint in his eyes, like, when the land tells you to burn. Like, you got to look around.
Yeah,
there's a million clues, but it's not. It's tricky with the bureaucratic systems to align intuition with scheduling, right? But it's the same
right.
with
You have to file. You're filing the paperwork. You're like,
exactly. Yeah,
it's passed. Or
yeah.
Too late now.
But you look to harvest, like they do that. That's all intuitive. It's like the sugars and the the temperature, and so it's totally possible. It's just kind of it's and that was the point of Arable, is like bringing these different perspectives, just to have that epiphany, like, oh, if we treat it like if we treat burning like a harvest, and schedule it in that way and do measurements in that way, then it's already there. Like, the technology's already there.
Okay. Yeah, I know you have some of the ones that we've talked about, kind of prepped or post production, what have you. But you have kind of others in mind, and you don't have to say who they are, what they are, but like how are you kind of continuing the series?
I mean, there's definitely a short list. I mean, these are probably going to kind of roll out through the year, probably till the end of year, and then we have pieces of filmed things with, again, because everything's so seasonal, like we'll go out and capture something just because it's the only time it happens that year, and then but we don't have an interview with the person or things like that. So there's a lot in the archive, and there's a lot of interest in this model of understanding agriculture, but also the identity of a place, right? Back to Sonoma, the goal with this is to feed the essence of the place so that it's healthy enough to continue to tell its story. It's you're also feeding the persona, right? You're also feeding the tourism industry. If you get the essence really cooking, then there's like so many stories to tell and so many reasons to visit and experience a place. And then the person takes that back to their community, and they're like happened with me and sitting at the pub and like understanding the mythic living kind of dynamism of a place, right? Because that's everywhere. It's in every place.
Yeah, and I guess I think the important part with the people that you're talking to is they're like new stories.
Yeah,
people don't know.
Yeah,
so there's just like an inherent excitement.
Yeah,
I think when there's a new story that's completely different, maybe from what they've previously heard, and just kind of builds onto that place.
Yeah,
more,
totally.
So.
Yeah. I play around a lot with like the past and the future, like I always like am like doodling. It's like progress in the past or something, or like progressive. It's like we think of the past as being like conservative in a way, and but it's like there's so much artistry that has been a part of every era, and to kind of relink with that all looking forward, and like Chris and Matt and Maria, and as we experienced with the Burns, and then of course with Tom Larson and the beginnings of organic farming out of the rodeo, things like that, and like the enterprise vineyards like Phil Couturier, like you hear stories about when they were trying to farm organically, they were being like, it's like a witch trial. Like, you're insane.
Yeah.
Like,
I was
that's
just going to bring them
insane.
up
Yeah.
actually. Like, another one. Like,
And it's
spreading it.
standardized now, and it's like Whole Foods is. I remember like a health food store was like a weird witchy place to go.
Right.
And now it's totally standardized, and so just being a part of those initial sparks when they're happening, which I feel like are happening with all these personalities, is just it's always so cool to be around, and if you can capture it and share it with people to then carry that spark into their community, that's how you turn it up, and get things going.
Yeah. Where can people kind of find them?
Well, yeah, there's
That's the best way.
the Let's Get Deep are live on the Future Collective YouTube, and then we have used the audio, thanks to you, to just put it on a podcast platform, because
Right.
it has a kind of a podcasty feel, right? I mean, you can
for
just
sure.
listen to it. So again, next week the trailer should be coming out, and then we'll start to release the episodes, which are conversations, and then we've done some shorts, like where we go out in the field with the burns. We went out on a couple sites with Matt Neese into a hybrid vineyard of Baca Noir, and then Maria and Matt, we both go to some of their orchards and understand like the dry farmed values, and then the other kind of heirloom varietals that you sort of have to reverse engineer, like how you ID them and understand like what the varietals are, because they're old 100-year-old trees. There's no records.
These are the apple orchards and of
West
of
County
Sonoma.
over there.
Okay.
Yeah. It was Sebastopol. Yeah, it was a big apple industry over there, and those trees are, it's sandy loam soil. Like the taproots go way down, and they've survived. They've been stressed. They haven't been managed as best they could be, but if you're looking at a wine product, like stress vines are kind of like what you do. So the trees are stressed, and so they're working with those trees, and they're very expressive fruit. A lot of personality. Yeah.
Cool. Is there anything we've kind of missed, or anything that you want to touch on?
I think that's it. I mean, the rest is I would just love for people to watch the episodes and then use those as connections to go explore these products, and then like what everybody else is doing, because they all have their own programs, like the Unfiltered program, and all these things that are all just connected. The Sorbet crew is really cool. They're doing events. And it just keeps kind of undulating out into surprising manifestations.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people doing really good work right now. Feels like it's hopefully a lot of things coming together for people. Obviously, like the wine industry as a whole is whatever, but a lot of these producers are kind of I don't want to say larger than that, but it's like a different path. A little bit. So
and they're all at that place where they got to ask questions like, where does this go? Some great bands, were bands for 2 years, and made some of the most important touchstone cultural things of all time. Some have changed and morphed and gone mainstream, and then gone back to acoustic things, and it's just kind of like listening to what it wants to be for you, and to let something go is totally cool, because it makes room for to do something else,
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just hope that people are able to like listen to their inner compass and know like what the thing wants to be, And if it's a quick thing, it's a quick thing. If it's a long-term thing, then know how to ride that and support it. And it's all cool,
Thanks for listening today. Aaron is doing some great, interesting work exploring these hidden niches of Sonoma and shining a light on folks working in the local wine community and the larger organizations as well. You can find links to the episodes for all platforms at thefuturecollective.org/arable and follow them on Instagram at thefuturecollective.sv to hear about new episodes. Please follow the podcast on wherever you're listening and the Instagram at Indie Wine Podcast. You can email Indie Wine Podcast or Instagram with comments, questions, or feedback. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love if you told a friend or wine lover about it and help spread the word. Rating, reviewing, or donating at patreon.com/IndieWinePodcast helps a lot too. It all goes to offsetting podcast expenses, keeps it ad-free, available for everyone, and helps support independent folks. We'll be back soon in another episode. Have a good one.